Hello everyone. So the next topic which we will be discussing here is about the blastocyst. Now what do you understand by this term? So the definition of blastocyst is that it is a hollow, what is it? It is a hollow cellular mass formed during the first development, which is consisting of cells which is forming the tropho trophoderm, which is the inner cell mass, and therefore the fluid-filled cavity of the blastocele is being understood as the blastocyst. So this is what is known as the blastocyst. Now let's discuss it further. That blastocyst, it is the structure that is present in the mammals, and it is known as the blastula in other animals. So what is it known as in other animals? It is known as the blastula in other animals. So after the process of fertilization, the blastocysts form within 5 days, and it is fluid filled cavity that opens up in the morula, which is an early embryonic stage of a 16-ball cell. So in the next slide, basically there is a diagram which is showing that how this process of fertilization to the blastocysts goes like this. So it is the process, it is formed in the process called the blastulation. So blastocyst, it is formed in the process which is called as the blastulation, which is between the 5 to 14 days after the process of fertilization. So this is formed after the process of the fertilization. So the blastocyst is composed of 200 to 300 cells, and it has a diameter of about 0.1 to 0.2 nanometers. So this is what is blastocyst. So the blastocyst is only found in the mammals. The next comes is the particular diagram that how the blastocyst looks like. So there is a outermost layer which forms the placenta and other supportive tissue which are necessary for the development of the fetus, and the inner mass gives rise to the body tissues. So the embryonic stem cells isolated from the inner mass are used in tissue replacement after injury and in the regenerative medicine as well. So this is how a blastocyst looks like in case of the mammals. The next is how this blastocyst leads to the formation. So how this blastocyst is formed. So after the process of fertilization, there is a single cell structure which is called the zygote, which is being formed. So the zygote, it undergoes a series of cell division leading to the formation of a hollow cell mass which is known as the blastocyst. So what are the stages here? So the first stage of the blastocyst formation is when the zygote encapsulated in the zona pellucida layer, which divides in such a way that the entire process from the 2 cell, 4 cell, 6 cell, 8 cell and 16 cell stages are there. So the cells during the cleavage stage is known as the blastomere. So what is it known as? It is known as the blastomeres. It is known as the blastomeres. The blastomeres in the 2-cell stage undergoes the process of mitosis, which is an equational division, and cytokinesis. Cytokinesis is basically the division of that cytoplasm simultaneously. So this process occurs simultaneously. Now, once there is a development of this 8-cell stage or 16-celled embryo, the blastomeres form a tight junction with one another. So they form the tight junction with one another, and this leads to the deformation of the round shape and the formation of mulberry-shaped clusters of the cells called the morula. So this stage is called as the morula. The junction which is between the blastomeres forms an outer cell mass and inner cell mass, which is called the embryo. So that is called as the embryo. So in the next slide, we will be discussing about the embryo as well. Now, there is a fluid which starts accumulating inside the zygote, which leads to the formation of the blastocyst. So there is a fluid which leads to the formation of the blastocyst. So once the fluid starts accumulating, the blastocyst expands to form a blastocyst. So the blastocyst is so formed consists of two distinct tissues, which are the outer layer, which is called the trophoblast, and the inner layer, which is called the inner cell mass. So that was being displayed in that particular diagram, the structure of the blastocyst. So finally, the stretched zona pellucida breaks and the release of the blastocyst. This is called as the process or as the hatching. So what is hatching? When the zona pellucida breaks and releases the blastocyst. So the blastocyst then undergoes implantation in the uterus. So after this stage, it will go and implant into the uterus. So the blastocyst adheres to the endometrial walls of the uterus, and this process of attachment of blastocyst to the uterine wall, what is it known as? It is known as the implantation. So this process is known as the implantation. Now the next is about the embryo. So embryo development. So embryo development refers to various stages within the development of the embryo. Embryonic development of plants and animals, they vary. They will vary according to the plants and according to the animals. So if I talk about in case of the animals, there are different stages which are being observed during the embryonic development, which differs from species to species. So after the fertilization, once the zygote is formed, the zygote divides mitotically to 2, 4, 8 and 16 cell stage. So these cells are known as the blastomeres. So what are these known as? So these cells are known as the blastomeres. Then comes the morula. So what is the morula? Morula is when the embryo is having 8 to 16 blastomers. So the morula divides mitotically and transforms into the blastocyst. So the outermost layer of the blastocyst is known as the trophoblast, which get attached to the wall of the uterine known as the endometrium, and the implantation starts within the first week but gets completed by the second week. So the inner mass of the blastocyst forms an embryo, and the embryonic and the extra embryonic tissues are being formed due to the differentiation of the blastocyst. So the implantation completes in the second week. So the interdigited chronic villi of trophoblasts in uterine cells from the placenta, which is the connection which is between the mother and the growing fetus. So the embryo gets nourishment and oxygen from the placenta. Moreover, the placenta also helps in removing the waste produced and carbon dioxide by the embryo. So it also acts as an endocrine and secretes various hormones like the HCG, estrogen, progesterone for maintenance of the pregnancy. So this was about the embryo formation. The next is about the similarities which are between the blastocyst and the embryo. So now what are the similarities? So both the embryo and the blastocyst, they are diploid structures. So they are diploid structure, which means they are 2N. So both are formed by the fertilization of gametes in the animals. They are formed by the fertilization of gametes in the animals. Now both the structures possess potent cells and hence can be used in the diagnostics. So they can also be used in the diagnostic because they possess the potent cells. And both are formed inside the mother. So this is important that both are formed inside the mother. Now we have studied about the similarities. The next comes is the difference between the blastocyst and the embryo. So now what is the difference between the two? The difference between the two are: First of all, blastocyst is a hollow, thin-walled structure which is formed during the early development of the embryo. Whereas embryo is a rudimentary stage of the living being with a potential of development. Then, the formation in which the blastocyst is being formed is called the process called the blastulation. Whereas the process of formation of the embryo is called the gastrulation, neurulation, and organogenesis. Blastocyst is formed by the cleavage of the zygote, whereas embryo is formed by the parts of the blastocyst, that is the inner cell mass of the blastocyst. So we have studied the blastocyst, so the inner cell mass is the part of the blastocyst. Then it is formed after 5 to 14 days after the fertilization, blastocyst, whereas embryo takes about 2 to 11 weeks after the fertilization. So blastocyst is in vitro fertilization where transfer of blastocyst shows a high pregnancy rate, but in case of embryo it shows a low pregnancy rate. Blastocyst is only found in the mammals, whereas the embryo, it can be found in both the plants as well as the animals. So this was all about it. These are some of the references.